Today's media exploration involves Sargent Watercolor Crayons. The set usually comes with a brush. I think my brush might be missing. Yeah, it is. So I'm using this brush, which actually came with a paint set. But let's get started. So this particular set has 12 colors, and we're just going to do some exploration and see what this material can do. Okay, so I've got some dry colors here. You can see that it does blend. You can use just like a regular crayon and it blends. You can make your secondary colors like orange and green and purple, but let's see what happens when we add water, because these are watercolor crayons. There's our primary colors. Now let's see what happens when we wet the part where they were mixing. Oh, and there we go. You've got a really rich orange that is produced through mixing. Really deep green. And a really nice purple. So you can, this is starting to bleed in, so I'm going to just blot it. I'm just going to blot it a little bit so it doesn't mix in together, but you can see that you can go with just your primaries from the set and mix your secondaries, or of course you could use the orange, green, and purple that are already there, that pre-existing secondary colors. Let's see what happens if we want to maybe make some tints. Okay, so you can actually get some pretty good tints using the white. Let's try one other trick. So if I have a palette, like this one, let's say that I want to make some liquid paint. So I'm going to color in. Alright, so you can actually color into a plastic or slick surface palette, color that in, and then liquefy it, and that's going to give you a really great way to make washes of color without coloring on the paper first. And you'll probably get a lot more coverage using less of your crayon, so that's pretty awesome. Going to draw with it, and then I'm going to use some watercolor paint. So in this instance, I'm going to go into the violet, and I'm going to paint in this heart and All right, so what you can do there is you can use your watercolor crayons to draw out your image and then use paint to paint it in. And the crayon just disappears, which is a lot nicer than if you were to draw this with marker or pencil, because then you would have those lines that stick around. So that's a nice option. But we haven't tried the effect of if we dip one of these in water. So let's just just the tip. We don't want to dunk the whole thing, but let's just dip the tip in and see what kind of marks we can make with that. Okay, so you definitely can see a difference between when it's wet and dry. So that's an approach you could take to try to get some bolder lines. Not my favorite, but it's a technique. Let's see. Let's say we want to do some resist. So I'm going to use some regular not washable crayons. Got my yellow crayon and coloring really heavy with that so that it's super waxy. Okay, and now I'm going to use my lighter blue from the watercolor crayon. I'm just going to color right over it. You can already tell that it doesn't even seem to color that much on top of the yellow part, so that's interesting. Okay, and now let's try to turn that into paint. And I can see that it's beading up on the wax. I could actually go in and just wipe it off. But it seems to work pretty much the same as painting over something with watercolor. We can also see what would happen if we were to maybe draw a little get a better marker than this because it's running out. Okay, so that's combining that with Sharpie, and then while we've got the Sharpie out, these are pretty much dry, so it looks like, let's see if you can, oh yeah, you can write right on top. There you go. It works well on top, doesn't seem to affect the marker nib. So there's some really great things you can do there. You can also, you know, color on top of them. So if I go back to my heart, which is now pretty much dry, I could take a crayon and go in. This is just a regular wax crayon and work into it that way. I could also take a watercolor crayon and go on top of it with the watercolor crayon. I could leave that as just the liquefied, or I could go back in and mix that on top, and you get like a little bit of a different color. So all kinds of things that you can do with the watercolor crayons. They work really well. They're fun to just experiment with and test out and see what things you can do, how you can use them.